All right, let's be real. When you think of ancient legal codes, you probably think boring, right? Dusty scrolls, dense language. Well, today, we're going to flip that on its head. We're taking one of the oldest law books in the world, Exodus 21, and turning it into a movie right inside your mind, scene by scene. We're going to see how an ancient society tried to build justice from the ground up. Let's dive in.
So I want you to imagine you're starting completely from scratch. You've got a brand new nation, a whole community of people just trying to figure things out. How in the world do you create order out of all that potential chaos? That was the big question they were facing. How do you even begin to build a society?
And the answer they came up with? It's pretty straightforward, really. You start with the rules. You create a kind of blueprint for how people should treat each other. And that's exactly what Exodus 21 is. It's one of the earliest blueprints for justice we've ever found.
So where does this blueprint even begin? Well, it starts at the most personal level you can imagine, the rules about an individual's rights and their place in the community, kicking things off with the laws for servants.
Okay, so right out of the gate, the rules set a timer. Verse 2, a Hebrew servant serves for 6 years, but that 7th year, that's your freedom year. Simple enough. Verse 3 keeps it simple too. You leave with whoever you came with. But then, verse 4 hits you with this gut-wrenching choice. If your master gave you a wife and you had kids, that new family belongs to the master. Just picture that scene. A man is walking toward his freedom, but he has to look back and leave his wife and children behind. So what if he just can't bring himself to leave them? Well, verses 5 and 6 give him this incredible option. If the servant stands up and says, look, I love my master, my wife, and my children, he can choose to stay forever. And this choice is sealed in a really powerful public ceremony. You have to see this. The master takes an awl, brings the servant to the doorpost of the house, and pierces his ear. It's a permanent, visible mark that says, I belong to this family by my own choice for life.
Now, the rules pivot for a daughter who is sold by her own father. Verse 7 says she doesn't automatically go free like the men do. And you have to ask, why the difference? Well, verses 8 and 9 explain that this was basically a form of marriage contract. She was intended to be married to either the master or his son. But here's the key part. The law builds in some serious protections for her. If the master decides he's not pleased with her, he can't just turn around and sell her to some foreigners. Her family has to be given the first chance to redeem her, to buy her back.
And the protections don't even stop there. Verses 10 and 11 lay out what you could almost call a prenup. 3 non-negotiable rights this woman has, even if her master takes another wife. Her right to food, her right to clothing, and her marriage rights. Think about that. If he fails to provide any one of those 3 things, the whole deal is off. You could just see her, right? Turning her back and walking away. A free woman, no payment necessary. Her rights were violated, so she's out.
All right, so we've covered a person's status. Now the laws get intense. We're moving into personal safety. What happens when order breaks down and tempers flare? This next section is all about violence, injury, and the very steep price of hurting someone else. And the law here is absolutely brutal and clear. Verse 12, you strike someone, they die, you die, period. But verse 14 adds this incredible detail about intent. If you planned it, if it was premeditated murder, there is literally no escape. Imagine the scene. A killer, panicked, runs to the most sacred spot he can think of. He's clinging to the horns of the holy altar, begging for sanctuary. But for a cold-blooded murderer, the law says you will drag him away, even from my altar, so that he may die. There's no refuge.
But, okay, what if it was a total accident? Verse 13 gives us the complete opposite scenario. If the death wasn't planned, if, as the text says, God delivered him into his hand, then there's a different path. So the picture in your head shifts. It's not a guilty man clinging to an altar. It's a terrified person running for their life, not from guilt, but from vengeance, heading toward a city of refuge glowing on the horizon, a place where he can be safe.
Next, the laws zoom in on the family, and wow, the value they placed on parents is just off the charts. Verse 15, just striking your father or mother is a death sentence. And if you think that's intense, look at verse 17. Even just cursing them, same penalty. The message is absolute. Dishonoring the people who gave you life is one of the worst things you can possibly do.
And then in verse 16, we hit another absolute no-go. Kidnapping. It doesn't matter if you sell the person or if you're just caught holding them captive, the penalty is death. The mental image here is stark. A kidnapper is caught red-handed. Their terrified victim is right there. That's it. The moment they're found, their fate is sealed.
So what about fights that don't end in death? Verses 18 and 19 paint a picture of a brawl that leaves one man stuck in bed. Now, if he recovers enough to get up and walk around with a staff, his attacker gets to avoid the death penalty. But, and this is a big but, they are absolutely not off the hook. They have to pay for all the man's lost work time, and they have to cover his medical bills until he is thoroughly healed. It's all about making the victim whole again.
Okay, verses 20 and 21. These are really tough to read, and they show you the brutal reality of this ancient world. If a master beats his male or female servant, and that servant dies right there on the spot, the master is to be punished. But then verse 21 adds this chilling detail. If the servant hangs on for a day or two before dying, the master is not punished, because it says he is his property. The visual is just a broken rod lying on the ground. The line between justice and injustice hangs on just a few hours, all based on this idea of a person as property. Verse 22 gives us a very specific and tragic scene. Imagine this chaos. Two men are fighting, just going at it, and they accidentally hit a pregnant woman nearby, causing her to go into premature labor. If there's no serious injury to her or the baby, the guy who hit her has to pay a fine that's decided by her husband and the local judges.
But what if that accidental blow does lead to serious harm? This is where verses 23 to 25 introduce one of the most famous and probably most misunderstood legal principles in all of history. An eye for an eye. The punishment has to fit the crime. Exactly. Life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, burn for burn. It's a principle of strict proportional justice, really designed to stop endless cycles of revenge.
So you might be wondering, okay, does eye for an eye apply to a servant? Well, verses 26 and 27 give us a surprising answer. No, a master can't just take his servant's eye. Instead, justice comes in the form of freedom. Picture it. A master loses his temper, knocks out a servant's tooth, or destroys their eye. He doesn't lose his own tooth or eye, he loses his property. He has to stand there and watch that servant walk away, a free person. The injury itself becomes the price of their freedom.
From people hurting people, the law now zooms out even further. Our last section tackles what happens when the things we own, specifically our animals, cause the harm. It's all about responsibility. Okay, verse 28 gives us the classic case of the goring ox. An ox kills someone. What happens? Picture this. The ox itself is considered guilty and is stoned to death. Its meat can't even be eaten. The owner, if he had no idea the ox was dangerous, is in the clear. But then, verse 29 flips the script. If the owner knew his ox was aggressive and he didn't lock it up, the responsibility lands squarely on him. Now the visual is like a split screen. On one side, the ox is being stoned. On the other, the negligent owner is also facing the death penalty. But the law provides an off-ramp for the negligent owner, and it's laid out in verse 30. It's a ransom. If the victim's family agrees, the owner can pay a certain amount of money, a redemption, to save his own skin. You can just imagine this tense negotiation, right? The guilty owner offering a heavy bag of silver to the grieving family. And verse 31 makes it clear, the same rule applies whether the victim was a son or a daughter. So what if the victim of that goring ox was a male or a female servant? Verse 32 gives us a very specific number, a fixed price. The owner of the ox has to pay the servant's master 30 shekels of silver. The visual is just that, a close-up of 30 silver coins being counted out. A stark, specific value placed on that life. The chapter wraps up with a couple more cases of negligence. Verses 33 and 34 are pretty straightforward. You dig a pit, you don't cover it, someone's animal falls in, your fault, you pay. Then verses 35 and 36 deal with your ox fighting my ox. If one kills the other, the owners split the value. But, and here's that theme again, if you knew your animal was a troublemaker and did nothing, you have to cover the full cost. The principle is always the same. You are responsible for what you own.
And that's the tour. A society's first draft of justice, trying to cover everything from family loyalty to runaway livestock. These laws show us a world that was deeply, deeply concerned with order, responsibility, and trying to find the right balance. And it kind of raises a final question for us to chew on. When we look at this ancient code, with its mix of really fierce punishments and some surprising protections, what does it truly tell us about their values? And what reflections does it cast on our own?